our theme today is departure. Now, Robert Frost once said, "The only certain freedom is in departure." And we've all experienced moments of departure in our lives, but what do those moments mean for you? How have those moments shaped your work? Those are some of the questions that we will be exploring today, asking, maybe answering. Our speakers will discuss their own moments of departure, what inspired those departures, how departure can inspire us all to create, to draw strength, find new possibilities. And to start, I'm going to tell you about one of my own moments of departure. Now, how many of you are familiar with public radio? All right. I've got tote bags for all you guys backstage. Well, as noted in my introduction, I am a journalist. I was what we call a host, an anchor, at Marketplace for 11 years. It's a national show based in Los Angeles, heard on public radio stations across the country, with some 9 million listeners each week. I hosted a personal finance show called Marketplace Money, which means I know more than I ever thought or hoped I would want to know about 401ks, college savings plans, CD ladders, HSAs, FSAs, CDOs, HMOs, credit card debt, the housing market, corporate welfare, welfare for the poor, Wall Street, and the financial struggles of Main Street. All of that right here. Before all that, I was a sports reporter for a couple of years, and before that, a general assignment reporter covering whatever was happening that day in Portland, Oregon, and Boston. My job at Marketplace was the job that I had always dreamed of having. I started listening to public radio when I was studying journalism just up the road at Northwestern. Go Cats! Yeah! While I was there, they didn't win any games. I filed my first ever national story for Marketplace right after I started my career back in 1990. It was a story about the first ever Nike town. And from there on out, I knew that's where I wanted to work someday. Someday I would work there. I just knew it. It wasn't that I was particularly enamored of business and finance. Hell, I got a C in Econ 101. What I loved was the way they told stories. They had fun with this subject that most people find utterly boring and irrelevant to their daily lives. There's a reason they call economics a dismal science. But I wanted to work there in the worst way. I cannot even tell you how much I wanted to work there for 10 years. And in 2001, it happened. They called me while I was living in Boston and said, "Come and audition," which I did. And I got the job of hosting the Marketplace Morning Report, which is this series of short newscasts that my colleague and I did at dark 30 every weekday. You may know him as he is now the host of Marketplace, the afternoon show, Kai Risdahl. Honestly, I could not believe I got to work there. Could not believe it. I couldn't believe I got one of the most coveted jobs in broadcasting. I had a nice salary. I had fans across the country, around the world, in fact. At the ripe old age of 32, I was in a place that I thought would take me at least another decade to achieve. It was wondrous. And for more than a decade, I worked at this job I could not believe I had. And 1 year ago, I walked away. I departed from 20 plus years in journalism. I departed from the only skills I've ever known or had. I departed from what I thought was the entirety of my identity. The details aren't terribly important. They involve office politics that didn't sit well with me, my longing to branch out to something other than personal finance, which gets really old really fast when you're doing the same 6 stories week in, week out. So I jumped without a net. I left in mid-November of last year without any inkling of what I was going to do next. Friends asked me what the hell I was doing. People were pretty sure I was either fired or that I had some secret new job that I couldn't tell them about, taking my personal finance expertise to the CIA maybe. They can't figure out their retirement portfolios. In reality, it was all me. And that was something most people just could not understand. You left your fancy national broadcasting job for Nothing? No way. People don't do that, right? The other reaction, of course, was, hey, that's awesome. Good for you. Who doesn't want to quit their job? But even that reaction was tempered by the fact that I didn't know what I was quitting to do. My departure did not have an arrival. It did not have a destination. Now, before I go any further in my story, I want to look back at this word, departure. If you think about that word, what's really striking is how many different interpretations of it you can come up with. And to get a sense of that breadth, I turned to today's equivalent of the magic 8-ball, also known as Facebook. I asked my friends and my fans, what's the first thing that pops into your head when you hear that word, departure? And here's a sampling. O'Hare Airport. That was the first one that came up. And most of my friends are in LA, but that was from someone who lives here in Chicago. And it was one of several to cite airports, runways, gates marked, departure, right? And this is what pops into my mind as well. Airports, airplanes, suitcases. Another answer was on the way to a new adventure. And that was another common refrain, the idea that departure signals the start of a new adventure. Segue, the idea that I'm deviating from a path. A couple of people cited movies. A great movie about a man who played cello at a crematorium. Anybody familiar with this movie? It's called Departures. That was a new one for me. I also got Up in the Air and Big Trouble. Apparently that also has some sort of airport reference. Another one that came up was firing. So departure as this euphemism for someone leaving a company. On a more somber note that I think shows how different our perceptions are of this word, funerals. The dearly departed. Departures from this life, this world that we share and inhabit for such a short time. And a couple of people mentioned that I guess American Express has a magazine called Departures. That was the first thing that popped into their head. Great customers for American Express. The response that most resonated with me, aside from the airports, was a lot of people said departure for them meant the word change. A departure always signals a change, right? And change, of course, comes in all colors, all shapes, sizes, and emotions. My departure was like that. Part of me was so excited to just get out and do something new, see what the world had on offer, change things up. I might as well have been boarding a flight, arrival destination unknown. We're just gonna fly around until we have to land. But another part of me felt like a piece of my soul was ripped from my being. That part of me, a huge part of my identity, was dead, or at least on its way there. For me, departure encompassed the vast emotional spectrum, that uneasy feeling lurching from, man, this is awesome, to, oh, crap, what have I done? It's pretty awful. And that feeling lasted for months. I had days when I was sure it was all going to be fine, that I'd find that next thing that I wanted to do because, we all have that next thing we want to do, right? We just have to figure out what color our parachute is. And I kept freelancing for public radio and the New York Times. Those were great days when I was busy. I was so proud of getting work on my own, figuring out how to be my own boss. Dragon Slayer! But the other days when I didn't have a project or an article in the New York Times or a gig hosting some other show, those were deeply, deeply sad and full of self-recrimination and doubt. What the hell have you done? You idiot. You ruined your life. You alone ruined your life with no one else to blame. You walked away. Meanwhile, people around me kept saying things like, this is so cool. I can't wait to see what you do next. And if that's not a loaded sentiment, I don't know what is. I mean, think about that. The expectations baked into that phrase, I can't wait to see what you do next, because it means you're going to go on to do something even more awesome than you were doing. But I already did something pretty awesome, so no, I'm probably never going to match that. Never will top myself, which is what everyone is expecting me to do. I know we're in mixed company here, so earmuffs, kids, but my first and ongoing thought was, oh, shit. Luckily, over those same months, I was a candidate and a finalist for a huge job, huge, host of NPR's Weekend All Things Considered. And guess what the finalists got to do? They got to host the show for an entire weekend, which I did in early June of this year. And you want to know how I did? Nailed it. That seemed to be the consensus of everyone who heard me, friends and strangers alike. Mom and Dad, of course, were over the moon. And so was I. I finally realized that this was why the universe told me to leave Marketplace, because this job opened up 2 weeks after I left. And the universe, as we all know, is very interested in us as individuals. It's always looking out and speaking in the ears of all 7 billion people of us on the planet, right? I did not get the job. I cried in the shower after I got the official phone call saying that I was the runner-up. I went over and over and over the interview process, the audition process in my head, trying to figure out what else I could have done, what I did wrong. It was a rejection on a scale I had never experienced before. Each job has come easy to me. Most of them I was recruited for, so this was new and huge. And what it meant to me was that public radio did not love me as much as I loved it for more than 2 decades. To me, it meant the complete loss of self-identity. Because if I didn't get this job, the job I was made for, then I was done. Well, a week later, and this is now early July of this year, I gave a speech to a gathering kind of like this one. It's called the World Domination Summit in Portland, Oregon. And I told my story, including all the ugly bits, the feelings of desperation, self-doubt, the bouts of elation, tempered by the reality of being just Tess Vigeland, no longer Marketplace's Tess Vigeland. And at that point, I figured I had nothing to lose, so I offered my heart and soul on a platter to an audience of 3,000 total strangers. But in the end, I told them I believe I am still remarkable, and that my story, though not wrapped up with a happy ending, was still in progress, and that I'm still searching. And when I finished, those 3,000 strangers gave me a gift. They jumped to their feet, they applauded, and with that applause, they told me that my departure from an old identity didn't mean I no longer had one. They didn't give a crap that I was no longer Marketplace's Tess Vigeland. They thought I was pretty cool, just as me. And that night, I got an email from an executive editor at Random House who said, I was in the audience for your talk, and I think you should expand on what you said. And 11 days later, I had a very generous book deal. My speech went viral on the interwebs. I was asked to write a column about career transition for AOL, and I've heard from people around the world who've shared their stories about leaping without a net, and all the good and the bad and the ugly that goes along with that particular form, that particular image of departure. Does that mean that I've arrived somewhere? I'm not sure. My life now consists of interviews with people for the book, writing the book, telling those stories in a book. And that's just journalism. You know, it's what I've always done. And I think there just may be something else out there that I'm going to do, though I have no idea what that might look like or what that might be. Now, because of the book, because I have an extra year to figure that out, a year-long reprieve from figuring out what I want to do when I grow up, I think I'm still in the departure lounge, awaiting my flight. But I have a lot to do while I'm there. And I like being there, because it gives me the time to think about where I want to go and anticipate what that journey will be like. I say could because even with all the planning in the world, we never really know how the trip will turn out, right? We just know that departure means change. And I guess the best part of all this, at least for me, is that I am finally comfortable with not knowing exactly where and when I expect to land. Thank you.